This is TWiT.
You very famously were able to get the All Things D conference became and still is the place where the biggest names in tech would come and speak. You very famously got Steve Jobs and Bill Gates to join you and Kara on stage. That was quite a coup. All of us were going, wow.
Yeah. So,
and a great interview, by the way. They were.
Thank you.
You getting them together was massive because their relationship became clear in a way that we really never had known.
Yeah, I compare it to ex-presidents, and I'm serious when I say this. So this was in 2007. It was exactly 30 years from the launch of the Apple II, which along with the Commodore PET and the Radio Shack TRS-80 in 1977 were the first kind of mass market computers. And as I mentioned before, Microsoft had some software in that Apple II, the basic programming language that was included in there was theirs. And so they had worked together in 1977, and then again they worked together on the Mac in 1984, but they were also fierce competitors. I had heard them both in off-the-record private conversations being very nasty about each other. And but they, like ex-presidents who run against each other and say nasty things, they were 30 years in, they were still running big, successful tech companies, and there were not very many other people who had been around in 77 who were still running these companies in 2007.
Yeah.
So who were they going to, they even said, if you watch the interview, at one point, I think Gates said, I kind of miss, I'm glad to be talking to you because I kind of miss having more people who were around then.
Yeah.
Still around now to talk to.
Yeah.
And so they had this multi-layered relationship of bitter competitiveness, but also having been collaborators at the beginning. And the interview, first of all, it was a miracle to me that they agreed to the interview. I set it up, and they were both sort of amazed that each other was willing to do it if the other one would do it. So they agreed. And their PR people, their chief PR people, supported it and were helpful. And it almost fell apart in the green room about an hour and a half before it started. But
really?
Yes.
What happened?
Because, so the deal that we struck for them to do the interview was they agreed to do the interview, but which was an evening interview, but they said, both of them, by the way, had spoken individually at our conference in the past. And they said, well, I offered as a sweetener to throw in that they could each have a block, an interview, a segment in the conference by themselves if they wanted. And then they would do this joint thing at night. And so they both accepted. Microsoft, Bill Gates had announced his retirement, but it was still 18 months off or a year off. So he was still CEO, but they were interested in building up Steve Ballmer. So they gave their individual block to Steve Ballmer, and he came on stage in the afternoon of that day or the day before, I don't remember, and he was interviewed. And at Apple, there was only one person who was ever allowed in those days to represent the company at a conference like this, and that was Steve. So Steve appeared separately with me a few hours before the big joint appearance. And during that interview, this was not none of the, you have to understand, these were all unrehearsed interviews. They understood the big themes, but we never told them the questions. And it just occurred to me on the spot that because of iTunes, Apple was one of the biggest developers on the Windows platform, which was a bizarre thing. And so I just said to him, and he did not know this question was coming. I just said to him, I said, iTunes is now on hundreds of millions of Windows computers. What does it feel like to be one of the biggest developers of Windows software? How odd is that? What does it feel like? And he instantly got this devilish grin on his face and said to me, it feels like giving a glass of ice water to a person in hell.
Oh.
Now, Gates was not there yet. He was flying in on his jet for the evening joint appearance. But his PR person was there, and he was horrified.
Yeah.
So he had to go meet Gates's jet when it landed, and he met Gates's jet, and he briefed him on everything that happened at the conference. But particularly, Gates wanted to know about the Steve Jobs interview. And, of course, he had to tell him that Steve had said this. And so an hour and a half before the joint interview, we had agreed to a meeting in the green room, which we never did with other interviews. But this was an extraordinary moment, and we wanted to just get them comfortable and, whatever. And so Gates walks into the green room, and he's pissed. He's pissed. And Jobs walks in 5 minutes late with a big grin on his face. And the only staff they had with them were their absolute chief PR people at the two companies, Katie Cotton for Apple and Larry Cohen for Microsoft. And the two PR people were very worried. Gates was giving monosyllabic answers, and Jobs strolls in, grabs a bottle of one of those plastic water bottles out of an ice bucket that was in the green room, sits down on a chair, and Gates says, well, I guess I'm the representative of hell at this conference.
Oh, ow.
And Jobs said nothing but just handed him a bottle of ice cold water with the frost still on it, the thing from the bucket. And Gates cracked up, and everybody, and the PR people were like, oh my God, I'm so relieved. And the whole tension broke. And, we said to them, look, because when I was setting up the interview, they both said, well, we want this to be a high level we want to be statesmen of the industry in this interview. And I said, look, it's up to you. I'm not giving you the questions. You're going to have to figure out if you want to have a big fight on the stage. It's great for us as conference producers. We're fine. If you want to be statesmen on the stage, that's even better for us. That's what we would like. But if you want to have it devolve into a giant argument, that's okay too. It's up to you. And luckily, they were statesmen on the stage. They did not get into a cat fight or anything like that on the stage.